Okay. Hi, everybody. It's about 12:30, so we can get started now. I'm Kristen Body. I'm the Membership and Events Manager here at the Asheville Art Museum. I'm so glad you're all able to join us today. Today's program is being led by one of the museum's former photographers in residence, David Huff, and I'm really excited to have him here to speak to you all. Before I turn this over to David, I just want to go over some housekeeping for all of our attendees. And I do apologize that I turned on the waiting room without intending to, so I'll have to admit everyone as they come in. But first, microphones are muted and video is turned off by default. You should note that we are recording today's program, so if you prefer not to be recorded, please make sure that your audio and video remain off. Both the microphone and video camera symbols should have red lines through them to indicate that they're off, and you'll see that at the bottom left of your screen. And this recording will be shared in tomorrow's museum e-blast. And next, you also have two options for asking questions. The first is to type your question or comment into the chat box, which you should find at the bottom of your screen. And I encourage you to ask questions as we go. The second option is to use the raise hand feature, which you will find by clicking the participants button at the bottom of your screen. And when there's time, I will call on anyone with a raised hand and unmute your audio so you can speak directly to David. And finally, if you feel that there's anything we can do to improve these programs within Zoom, please let us know. I will send an evaluation out after this program is over to get your feedback, or you can also feel free to just email me directly. So thank you again for being here, and now please welcome David Huff.
Unmute myself. Hey, can everybody hear me? Yeah, okay, I can't hear you, so you can't respond. I'm gonna have it start for a little sound effect here. Let's see if you can hear this. There you go. So we're dressed for a construction site today, and I'm gonna show you some photos from the construction of the Asheville Art Museum. And I'll kill that now. All right. So let me find my presentation and pull it up here. I see there are a lot of photographers and friends on today. Hello, everybody. Glad you're here. And super psyched to also see some photographers because you guys can ask questions in the chat and all that good stuff. Let me figure out. Here we go. That's what I wanted. Boom. Great. So let me pull that over here, this over here. All right, so let's see. Christy, am I screen sharing? Can you guys see my photo?
Yes, yeah, we can see it.
John's got a big yes. Okay, cool. So let me start out with this one. I don't want to do the full view. So let me just go through. Well, we'll do full view anyway, and I might not be able to see chat. Hold on 1 second. I want to be able to make sure I can follow your chats. And Christy's going to help me with.
You should be able to pull up chat even when that's open at the top of your page. Yes.
All right. So where would I find chat on here, though?
At the top of your page. You should see view
options.
Thanks for that. There you go.
Oh, yeah. Cool. More. I see all the participants. There's chat. Cool. There we go. All right, great. Okay, cool. So the first photo here is to sort of start us out by saying this is going to be my photos of the museum. It's my perspective. And we all have different photos or different perspectives when we're in a space or a building or looking at people. And what's really cool now that I've done most of my photography here has been watching, while the museum was open, watching guests and visitors with their own phones, capturing different angles and different perspectives of the museum, and then putting those on Instagram. So this is really a celebration of everyone with a camera in their pocket who shoots photos and has a perspective and a take on a building, on people, etc. So let's get started here if I can get my thing to work. All right, this is the first photo I took, and this is pretty apropos right now for a number of reasons. One is you see the old part of the museum in the background. This old part of the museum, which was renovated, and then the new part was built onto this. This is the old library, the old Asheville Pack Library. And this is the library that Thomas Wolfe, when he was a young boy, would read in. And the statue you see in the foreground is a monument to Look Homeward Angel. This is a replica of the angel that is famous in his book, Look Homeward Angel, and his father built. And his father's shop was actually right here on the corner, right down the hill a little bit from the museum is where his father's shop was. And I want to start out with this photo because not only is it one of the first photos I took, and you see the crane in the background, but Thomas Calder had an article in the Mountain Express this week, and some of you may have seen it, part of a series of looking back at Asheville during the influenza in 1918. And Thomas Wolfe's brother Ben, if you've read Look Homeward Angel, you know that he had a very close relationship with his brother Ben, and Look Homeward Angel is semi-autobiographical. And his brother dies in Look Homeward Angel. Well, it turns out that his brother died in 1918, a week shy of his 26th birthday, of influenza. He died of the Spanish flu. So here we are in the middle of our pandemic, epidemic, and here's flashback back to the history of Asheville, back to the history of our country. Another reason for the context of this is that the Asheville Art Museum wanted to very much honor the old in this old part of the building in Old Asheville, while also embracing the new. So I'm going to give you a couple of shots, and for those that have been inside the museum, this photo here, this is actually the lobby area. So if you're looking at this photo and you look to the left, under there is where the gift shop is and where the ticket area is. And so if you've been in this space now, you'll know that those I-beam columns on the right, those steel columns, they are now covered in that cool modern cone interior. So that gives you perspective of where we are here. This photo is on the second floor. This is, and Christy, you can tell me what this wing is called. This is the cool wing. What's it called?
Now, is this the collection wing?
Yeah, great. So, yeah, thank you. If you've been in here, if you see where the wheelbarrow is, so if you go to the right of that, and you can see a little thing sticking out there, that's the oculus. So if you've been in the museum, that's what that section is. So I wanted to give you these two photos to be able to, if you've been in the museum or haven't yet, to give you context for what it looked like when it was being built. And also just the wild openness of the space as it was being constructed. And then here's just one last photo, really reflections on old and new, the old part of the museum, which is the old library, and the new part of the museum. Now I've got a comment here from Mary. As I understood it, his father didn't carve this. His father ordered several of these to sell. Okay, well, cool, thank you. I love having history be proper. So thanks for that. All right, so let's go into one last shot here at the top. This is another showing both the old and the new. Folks that know Asheville know that this famous Jackson building in the background, an example of old Asheville architecture. And then, of course, I love capturing guys building buildings on top of buildings and the cool things you can do with a zoom lens. So when I think it was probably over drinks with Pam, and you see Pam here in the photo in the right. Pam is the executive director of the Asheville Art Museum. It was probably when we were having drinks that she said, hey, would you like to document the building of the new museum? And I thought, wow, yes. I mean, I didn't have to even pause because, it means I get to put on a hard hat, roam around a construction site and take photos. It's sort of a photographer's dream, if you will. So I said yes, but what Pam really wanted, not only to document the building and those pieces that I just showed you. Oh, and there's Christy. Christy, you see Christy holding her coffee or whatever? That's Christy who's hosting our event today. She's in the purple sweater. So Pam also very much wanted to document the men and the women who were building the museum because she felt from the beginning that they should feel pride in this, that this was part of their legacy. And this is one of the things I love about this project is we don't often think about or get to see the people behind the scenes. like in film, we see the actors and the stuff on film, but all the people behind a movie that make it happen. Or when we go to a restaurant, and hopefully we'll be doing that more in the future, all the people back in the kitchen preparing our meal. We're the same for building of buildings. So Pam really wanted to document and show the people building the building. So I start with these three guys. These three guys from Beverly Grant Construction. You've got Dan Taylor on the right, and Dan was the supervisor. You got Henry Watts in the middle, and Henry was the executive VP of this project. And you got Sean Collins on the right, who was the project manager. So these three guys were the leadership team on the ground that actually built the building. And I love these different photos because I think I captured their personalities really well in these different photos. Henry obviously knew I was taking his photo. Dan and Sean did not. Henry actually lives across the street from the museum, and this was his last project before he retired from Beverly Grant Construction. A great team of guys, great process. So I'm just going to show you now some of the photos of people in action, and I'll talk a little bit about these photos. Feel free to ask questions about them. For you photographers, this is shot on a lens baby, which I love to play around with. And of course, you know, drama, if you want to find drama, right? You want to find something going on. I have a photo later of drywall. Drywall is not drama, but I'll show you that later anyway. But this is like drama and excitement. What's also cool, I don't know if you can see in this photo, but there's written on this saw is the name Fernando. Now, I don't know if Fernando is the name of the guy that owns the saw or Fernando is the name of the saw, but that was very interesting. It's put right there on the saw. This was a pretty exciting day for the museum. If you've been to the museum, you know it's got this beautiful glass out on the front. And this glass was actually, there's a company, I think, down in Tampa, Florida, Paragon, that designed this glass, but the glass was made in China and shipped in crates. And I was there the day they were opening the crates. And these guys, what an amazing team, with this big suction device, pulling up these different pieces of glass and fitting them right into place. And this is another example of how these different special units that built specific parts of the building really operated like little teams that would come in and knew what they would do. They did their thing and then they left. So it's a very cool process to watch. This photo gets a lot of attention because there's drama here. This photo was also in the exhibit that was in the museum. This is down in the basement, so you'll never get to go down where these guys were. They're working on the plumbing. And when I saw these guys in action, I took a number of photos. This is obviously my favorite. But what I love, of course, is the fire, the light, and this guy's helmet. I mean, it's epic, right? That American flag, kind of Captain America helmet. Because there's just a lot of drama and energy going on into this. The guy doing the welding is obviously the master welder. The guy on the right was really observing and watching. And I think he was in more of an apprenticeship relationship with this guy during this process. But once again, drama and cool stuff down the basement of the building. Sorry, you'll never get to see it. So this is one of the early shots. This guy was part of a team that was putting the rebar lines down in the floor. And in order to add filament, if you will, steel filament for the concrete to be poured and hold the concrete. And he's just blowing their work site after he's done. But I don't know if you can see do you see the little purple feather up in his helmet? That's what attracted to me. It's up on the right and it's up in his helmet. So he had a little purple feather in his helmet, which was personality to him and to who he was. No one else had feathers in their helmet, but he did. So here's another example of personalizing your helmet. This is also early on. This guy's part of a welding team. You'll actually see him later. He's in this series of photos twice. But he is carrying a step. So if the building's ever on fire, goodness forbid, and you have to exit, you'll step on one of his steps on the way out. But otherwise, you won't see it. So this is another example of behind the scenes in a building that you may never see. You'll see another sticker in a minute, but do you see his NASA sticker on the left of his helmet? I thought that was pretty apropos today since we're launching, the United States is launching 2 astronauts again today, this afternoon. So there you go, that's that guy. Someone just texted me, how long was the exposure for the welders? Woody, you would ask me that. let me look it up and I'll get back to you. I don't even remember. Well, I do know I was shooting on my 70 to 200 f4 zoom for that shot. And I'll talk more about zooms in a minute. Yeah, hey, Kevin, the colors there, it's fun. The colors are fun. All right, so some people on a construction site like to have their photos taken. In fact, some people come up to you and say, hey, you know, like the guy on the far right, he really wanted me to take his photo. He's got a great smile. Well, I was very aware when I was on this project that I was coming into their workplace, right? This is where these men and women work. And I thought, wow, do I want someone coming in and photographing me at work? And the answer is no. So I was conscious of that while I was working with people. And you get to read body language to where, and there would be people that I could read their body language and they just didn't want their photo taken. So I didn't take their photo. Now, with the zoom lens, I was able to take photos of people at times without them knowing I was taking their photo. But I also, in that case, and in all cases, wanted to only take photos that were respectful of the people in their space, because I was there by invitation and this was their work environment. But these guys and other folks like them love having their photos taken. Other folks aren't so sure whether or not they want you to take their photo. I had to snap this one though, because this guy was looking right at me through this and it was an epic photo. I talked to him later though, and he was totally cool with this photo, and I took a couple more of him as we went down the line. But it's all about being respectful of the space and respectful of the people who are there. This guy also wanted me to take his photo. So I said, okay, go back there and start over. So he went back with his stuff that he was bringing into the building already, and he brought it in and snapped this photo. So some folks obviously love having their photos taken. So construction sites are dominated by men, and this is a national trend, and it's probably no surprise to anyone. But there are women within the construction industry and women who work on construction sites. This is an example of drywall, not all that exciting, but I got to find a female contractor working on site. This was later in the game when hard hats were not necessarily required so much at this point, so she's not wearing a hard hat. But once again, I'm capturing someone at work. I'm using a zoom lens on this, so I'm far away. The museum did want me early on to capture a female contractor who actually had a hard hat on, and she was working in the basement where those welders were. So I was emailing back and forth with Henry and Pam to find out when she might be on site. And when I found out she was going to be on site, I went looking for her. You know, went down with my camera and have all my gear on. I get down in the basement. She sees me with my gear and she turns. And I go, hey, I'm shooting photos for the museum. I'd love to get a photo of you today. And she said, no. And I said, no worries. That's fine. I don't need to take your photo. I totally respect that. So I didn't get her photo because you don't know why people don't want their photos taken. It could be a number of reasons, and it's none of my business. But once again, that's about respecting the site and respecting the people there in their workspace. And that also has to do, I think, with part of the philosophy that Pam had through this whole project in honoring the people who are doing the work, is to respect them while they're doing it. Then at times you capture people just in action, doing their thing. He's coming down the steps. If you're in the museum, this is the stairway that goes up to the different levels. And coming down, I love this one because I guess sometimes you need to have 2 wrenches. So he's got two wrenches in his belt. You can see one in the belt loop on the right and one in the belt loop on the left. So while there's a lot of activity on construction sites that have to do with hammering, that have to do with sawing, that have to do with loud noises, this is also an important part of construction sites, which is keeping the water off the floors, keeping the trash picked up. So I wanted to capture people in all aspects of work. I don't know if you can tell, but it's actually raining in on him because this is an open space and you might see the rain going in front of his face. This was a chilly day. So particularly in the early parts of construction of a building like this, the men and women are exposed to the elements. And on cold, wintry, wet days, it's cold, wintry, and wet. This is on top of the building. If you look at, if you're looking at the building, you see packed squares behind this guy. And he's obviously welding, but this is the top of the glass part of the roof on the front. If you actually look down, you can see, I guess that's whatever street that is over there. I won't, let's don't worry about that. But anyway, Pack Square behind him. It's also raining on him this day, and he's out there in the elements doing his thing. It's fun when you're on a construction site and you're the day that people are sawing metal and welding, because you got a lot of drama. So this guy here, oh, Biltmore Avenue. Thank you, Christy. This guy here was the guy earlier who was carrying the steps. So here's the steps here, and a welding team, of course, doing the steps. Oh, I have a comment. This shows the extra insulation behind the drywall mentioned in a previous presentation. So, okay, cool. So insulation and drywall from one of the images. So this guy here obviously wanted his photo taken. And for you guys, your photographers, my exposure was a little slow, or my shutter speed was a little slow, but I snapped him anyway. All right, so this is the book that's that the museum put out with all the photos and da 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 da. And I want to quote Pam. So I gotta quote Pam here on this. I'm gonna pop out of my big mode. All right, so you can probably see the quote as I read it here. She says in this book, for all its unrelenting commitment to creating the best contemporary building possible, the museum and its many supporters believe that, actually it should be ultimately this momentous undertaking is about great art and creating a place for deep thinking and critical viewing, as well as a place for delight and discovery, a place for seeing new things and meeting new people. This is what makes the museum a living, breathing center for the community now and for future generations. So I love that quote, because the building is important, but it's not about the building, right? It's about the art that's in the building. It's about the people that are built the building, and it's about the people who are coming to the building. This cover design, Susan Rue, who does a lot of the design work for the museum, her beautiful design. That's a night photo I took. The building wasn't quite completed yet, but I got inside the fencing and took this photo. Blue Ridge Printing printed it here in Asheville. And what was cool about that project, I just got a shout out to Blue Ridge Printing. They do it old school, so it's not digital printing. This was done with big old school printers and buckets of different colored ink that they would pop down to make this. So the colors, if you see this book, that's why the colors just really pop. So this photo is a photo I took about a week before, well, maybe 3 weeks before the museum closed, which is kind of heartbreaking. This was a Saturday, I think. The museum was packed. And what was happening, of course, is that people were just swarming to the museum. Chrissy, you can tell us the numbers, but it was wonderful. People embracing the museum, checking out the museum. If you remember the photo earlier of this collection gallery, I showed you at the very beginning of the ocula there on the left. So that's that section there. For those of you wanting to know, you photographers know, this is on sticks. It's on a tripod. I've got a slow shutter going on, and you just sit in a corner and snap photos, and hopefully you get one. And I kind of got lucky with the little girl there looking at me. The person on the left, someone likes the person on the left has lost its arms and his head is turned in a swirl. Yeah, that was kind of cool. I thought that too, how their head is just sort of, you can see his nose and lips as he looks at that sculpture as he's walking into it on the left. It's kind of fun. You know, it's wild about photography is sometimes you don't know what you got till you look. And for those of you old school photographers who did film, you never knew what you had till you developed your film. Well, if you're really sharp and great, you knew what you had. But if you're like me, it'd be a surprise. And so even in digital, it's a surprise oftentimes what you get. For example, I knew this was a cool shot for a little girl, but what I didn't know until I saw it was that she had her finger on her mouth. And that just sort of makes that special little photo there. So I'm really fast because I don't like to talk a long time just to myself. I like to talk with people. So I've kind of run through all the photos that I wanted to show you today. I've got heaps of photos, and there's photos in the books. So maybe if someone could just start maybe chatting with me, throw me some questions, and I can answer some questions about what I've done. Photographers or museum lovers or anybody, just in that chat area there. Type in a question about anything that you have. Okay, so Christy. So David, how are the photos being used now and in the future? So the photos for the museum, they're gonna have a catalog of all of my photos that I took. Well, only the ones that I shared with them, not the bad ones. But they're going to have a catalog, and this is really for archival purposes as part of the history of the museum. And Christy, tell me, how old is the museum? I mean, it's been around for a while. Tell us how old. Yeah,
1948, yes.
Yeah. So, and the museum has lived in different places in its history in Asheville. But this is to document the building. Back in February, I had a really fun project up in DC with the Folger Shakespeare Library. The Folger Shakespeare Library is the largest holder of Shakespearean works in the world, and they're one block off of the Capitol in DC, and it's this amazing private nonprofit that's for the public. The people that developed it 80 years ago wanted to have this for the American people. Anyway, they're getting ready to, well, they're in the process now renovating this 80-year-old building. So they brought me up to document the whole building before they went under renovation. And for them as well, it's for archival purposes because they want people 100 years from now to see what the building looked like. So yeah, that'll be here. So Chuck, got a question from Chuck. Discuss the photographers who've influenced you. God, that's a terrible question, Chuck. Well, I mean, God, it's not a terrible question. It's just I don't remember names of photographers. Yeah, Ansel Adams, that's old school, but there's actually an Ansel Adams in the museum, and his big black and white stuff's amazing. I think really, Chuck, the folks that I get influenced by most are like people like you and John who are on here, and Kay, who's a photographer. I know she's on here. And looking at your all's work, and that's where I get, I go, oh, wow, how did he or she do that? That's where my stimulation comes from. So let's see, Woody. Hey, Woody, did you need to get photo releases from your subjects? So in this project, it's a very good question. So under the construction process, no, because that's pretty much a sort of a blanket, like in most businesses now, you're going to have a release that basically says someone can come in and photograph you. And that was the case here with Beverly Grant and their people. They know that they're going to be photographed. At the same time, I'm respecting those that don't. In this space right now, in this photo, the museum actually does state up front that you may be photographed while you're in the museum. And I think also in public space now, the law is you don't really need to ask permission. You could come up and photograph me on the sidewalk, and that's up to you. However, even when I'm in this space, I noticed a young couple that I wanted to photograph them, and I could tell that he didn't want me to photograph her, so I backed off. I was in my rights, if you will, but that's tacky. So how did I develop an interest in photography is a question. Well, actually, my friend Leslie is on here. And Leslie was my first client, one of my first clients during the Democratic National Convention back in, that was 12, right? Yeah, it was the second one. Yeah, when it was in Charlotte. And I had been just sort of shooting for fun. And like a lot of us, I grew up with a Pentax K1000 back in the day. And I just started taking photos, and Leslie got a gig with Leslie and did some photos for her. And I was actually shooting above my pay grade, and she knows that now, but the old adage, fake it till you make it. And so there it went. How did you come up with the idea of the crystal ball reflective photo? Hey, Jim Warlick. So that's called, what is it? Oh, you'd asked me and I forgot the name of that thing. It'll come to, somebody will give me the name, those little balls, lens balls or whatever. Anyway, I thought it was just a cool shot, and also to sort of show the many layers And what's cool about imagery, it's like this photo I've got you set on now. You know, there's a lot going on in this photo. I'm stopping time, if you will, in this image. These, you know, you come any day and people walking around, so what? But then if I can slow down the shutter, I get an interesting image. So that's why I use that crystal ball. Laurel has a question. Do you know why there is no stairway up to the cafe on the 4th floor and only an elevator? Well, there is a fire exit stairway. I do know that. Probably budget issues. I don't know. Christy, can you answer that question? It's a great cafe, by the way.
You know, I actually cannot answer that question. I came in towards the end of the construction process, but I think it is nice to just have the space separated from everything else. It's kind of a respite from the rest of your time at the museum. But I do know some of my other colleagues who have been at the museum for much longer, including Pam, are logged in, and maybe they can provide a better answer for you.
Oh, and there are 2 fire escapes, just in case you're wondering. Woody has a question. How did you safely get up to shoot the 3rd floor welder? Oh, okay. Well, I stood on the roof, but where you can't go, but I was safe. And I was actually standing on a roof part when I shot that welder out there. I took a selfie of myself, which I don't have included here, of myself reflecting at the Biltmore building across Pack Square, which was kind of fun. Yes, we got 2 fire escapes. Any other questions? Here's one. Hey, Kay, thanks for missing me in Charlotte when the world settles down. Oh yeah, so Kay Tuttle's on here. Kay's the executive director of a really cool place in Charlotte called the Light Factory, which is a center for film and photography. And so it's great having you here today, Kay. If you get to Charlotte, wow, it's world class, the exhibits they have and things down there. How about some other questions from there's John's got a question. What's your favorite kind of photography, John Merrick? Well, I've kind of fallen into this sort of architectural space, right? So shooting buildings, and I think it's possibly partly because of this project that kind of got me started in that. I'm currently working for the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation, documenting the the refurbishing of the Bluffs Coffee Shop, which is up near Sparta, North Carolina on the Parkway. And the Bluffs was the first building that was like a restaurant on the Parkway and very famous for many years. And then when they did some construction on the Parkway a number of years ago, they had to shut that section down and the coffee house sort of stopped functioning. So the Blue Ridge Parkway Foundation has taken it on to bring back. And hopefully this virus thing will be done at some point and we can go to the Bluffs Coffee Shop up on the Parkway and have coffee and eat. So I've kind of fallen, John, into this architectural space. And as you know, I also enjoy shooting high-end cars for a favorite client of mine. Every now and then I get to do that. And then let's see, how many hours did you take photos from Laurel? That's a good question. I think probably there's 20 hours of photography in here and all the stuff that I did. Oh, thanks, Christy, the way I humanize the process. So there's a question to Pam about the elevator again on the cafe. So maybe Pam wants to pop on or not.
Yes, Mary, I think we can address that another time since right now we want to focus on David's work, but
cool.
We can get in touch with you about that separately. And David, I actually do have a question for you too. I was just wondering, as a photographer and getting all these behind the scenes shots, how did it feel to see the museum taking shape?
Oh yeah. Well, that's a great question. So that's another fun part of this. So Beverly Grant, the main contractors and sort of part of their main team were there throughout the building of the building. But as you can imagine, a lot of these subcontracting groups would come in and do their part and move on. So for example, you see the beautiful glass in this shot. Those guys that installed that glass, they were there, I think just that day, got all that glass up, may have been more than one day. But anyway, they got it up in a hurry and then they were gone. So I did get to see the building come to fruition. And one of the things that's always special about something like this is that when I walk around now, I have memories of where I was when the walls weren't there and the rain was coming in. So yeah, I have a different connection with the building. I also sort of feel, although I didn't get to know the people well, I would visit with some of them. Someone would want to talk, and I would talk with them, or I might go up and ask them about what they were doing. I feel in a way, and they would probably care less, but I feel in a way I'm sort of representing them in these later photographs to show folks what they created. Okay, a lot of good questions here. Did you take any recent photos of downtown Asheville with stay home, empty streets? I haven't been taking photos of downtown Asheville. I've been staying home. So, but it has been empty. Actually, I did. I have to take that back. I went about 2 weeks ago and photographed a bunch of like boarded up buildings and things like that. Jason Sanford, Ash Vegas. He's the best guy roaming around Asheville taking photos. So check out Ash Vegas. Bye-bye, Leslie. Nice to see you. Thanks for being here today. Was there another question? Chuck, did you have a question? Oh, you asked about influencers. Yeah, okay, cool. John, you asked about the type of photography I like to take. So I think I've kind of defaulted on this. I like to shoot stuff that's sort of its own natural element. There's some phenomenal photographers out there that light things and do portraiture and things like that. And that's a different world than the world I'm in. Cool. Any other questions about the work or the museum? Let's see, here's Jeff Dalton. I got on the Zoom a little late, but did you take any photos of the architects? Yeah, Jeff, I did take some photos of the architects. They're not in this series. In the book that this picture's a cover of, there are photos that I took of the architects in that book. Good question. Hey, Chuck, I see you, man. Is that you with the beard? Ah, look at you. Looking good, man. Yeah, and Jeff just said the architects did a fantastic job. They really did. I mean, so here's one thing that's interesting about this building. Y'all may know there was a building here before. It was the old Asheville, well, we moved to Asheville in 1980, so I got to see Pack Place built. And most of you know that early 80 architecture is for just blech, right? It's just awful. So there was this building that for a while was the Asheville Art Museum and some other things. And so they tore all that down to build this. It's a lot easier to build a building on a brand new site than it is to take down something and put something back up. So interestingly enough, when they were working on this, and it's always going to take longer than you think, they discovered things while they were going about sort of some of the old backbone of the building that that needed to be fixed as they were going. So like things in the basement and the foundations need to be fixed while they're going. So you had delays in the game. So Asheville Art Museum, you all may have gotten this message that they're going to post this on YouTube. From John, of the shots of this series, could you show your favorite? I think, it's a good question. I think, well, you know, the old answer is they're all your favorites. I like this one a lot because I'm shooting it from above looking down, which is kind of fun. And this was early on in construction, so you got all this wild sort of material on the ground. There's also snow up there in the back, atop, if you see that, because it's winter and dirty. So I kind of like that photo. This one, of course, has a lot of drama, and people love that photo. I like this one because this guy was totally in charge and totally, I mean, just on the ball. That's one of my favorites, just because it's Fernando. Anyway, a lot of them I enjoy. So let's see. So Peter has a good question. How important is dynamism, motion, action in your photography? Is it a main focus for you in most of your work? Well, that's a good question. And this is a great question coming from a musician. Peter's a concert master violinist. So, and he would know a thing or two about motion. Yeah, Peter, I like to go where there's drama, where there's story, because you're telling a story, right? And so when there's action, in either way between people or people in their machinery, you know, and we'll go like to the building, that building shot I showed you at night. Maybe that also goes back to this, this shot here. you know, this adds drama to the shot, right? Because it's a different perspective, and you see the museum upside down behind it. And so it just, yeah, that's dynamism rather than just a photo of the building. Let's see. Hey, Constance, greetings. Are your photos now in the archives of the museum? Yeah, so they're all being archived, Constance, and cataloged as part of the archival history of the museum. In fact, I'm talking with the curator this week about getting all this stuff together for them. Chuck, gear choices. Yeah, that's you're a gear guy. I'm shooting on Sony cameras and just with a variety of lenses. The lens I use the most for architectural work is a Sony 16-35 f4. And then I do a lot of post manipulation because there's distortion in those wide lenses. And that's because I'm shooting on a 35 millimeter sensor as opposed to a medium format camera. But good question. Very good question. And then having fun with things like this. Let's see, did I miss any other questions? These are good. I'll go back to Look Homeward Angel here with the shot. So yeah, anything else? Christy, do you have another one? And folks, don't feel like you have to hang on here. If you want to bounce off, bounce off. But Christy, did you have a question?
Yes, I had one more. So you touched on this a little bit about the other work you're doing, but I'd love to hear more about your portfolio as an artist, other projects you've worked on, and maybe how they informed this one.
Yeah, so one of the cool things about this project, this was sort of the first project that I did documenting a building under construction. And I had focused on shooting people before. I shoot for an automotive client, and I'll shoot really cool high-end cars for them. But one of the things I also like is that when I've shot stores that have been built, I focus on the people in the garage, the people doing stuff. So I love capturing people in action and just really natural shots. You know, there are really great commercial photographers out there that will pose a lot of stuff and it comes across really well. I love capturing people as they're doing what they do. After this project, Jen Swanson, who became a consultant to Center for Craft, brought me down to Center for Craft just down the road from the Asher Art Museum because they were beginning a whole beautiful refurbing of their building that they're in, a 1920s building. And so I got to document that for them for a year. The focus on that was more on the building, but once again, for them to use it for archival purposes. So that was also a cool project. Let's see. Thanks, Jim Warlick. Yeah, documenting the worker's legacy. Jim is a good friend of mine who actually is down in Burke County in Morganton, has commissioned a statue to honor the men and women who worked in the mills down there. So that's another thing, that being able, it's sort of a privilege and honor to show the men and women behind the scenes making things happen. Because as a photographer, I'm a behind the scenes person, right? You see my work, but you don't see me in action. Darren, thank you so much. Do I do sporting events or glass blowing? Hey, Laurel, I have done glass blowing. I did some photography work for down at the NC Glass Center, which was a lot of fun. And once again, going back to gear, I used a lens baby on a lot of those photos, which was really kind of fun. NC Glass Center is a great place. Thank you, Heidi. Let's see. I appreciate your emphasis on respecting the subjects. Thank you. On the second photo in your presentation, did you play with flipping it upside down too? Yeah, so this is, you can, with this puppy here, so you know, obviously the museum isn't upside down, right? So I took the photo and then flipped it, right? So if I showed you this photo as it was actually taken, what's in my hand and the ball would be upside down, right? That's the way it does that. There was another question up here. I don't know if I can go back into the chat. I may have missed it from up above.
It looks like Mary asked about what you did before you moved to photography.
Oh, well, I do a little bit of this, that, and the other. I'm kind of part of the gig economy. I've got some filmmaking friends on here, Chuck and John, who are filmmakers. I did a family film in Brevard 100 years ago, and actually met some really cool people on that project. Melissa Fitzgerald, who was on The West Wing, is in that film. And Amy, who's from Asheville, Asheville High. If you saw the movie or the TV show, what's that TV show, John, that Leanne liked in Washington with the about the president? Scandal. So she played the president's wife on the TV show Scandal. She was in our movie we shot in Brevard. And I'm a big name dropping here. My producer who produced this film, this is apropos today because her brother's getting ready to launch a spaceship into space. Tosca Musk, who's Elon Musk's sister, she was the producer on my film that I did in Brevard 100 years ago. So I've had the privilege of being around fun and talented and interesting people. On the second photo, yeah, so we flipped it. Cool. So, oh, here's another thing about when you photograph your hand, you want to make sure your nails are clipped and they're clean. So I got lucky that day, didn't I? Yeah, cool. Christy, do you have any more questions or anything you want to say about the museum?
It looks like Jim just wrote another question about.
Oh yeah, Jim, that was the film we did, Simple Things, which was inspired by some stories my dad wrote. It's kind of like a Hollywood, not Hollywood, a Hallmark family movie. It's a sweet film. You can find it on iTunes and Amazon. It was a nice kind of first out. I know a lot more about filmmaking than I did back then. So you'll learn as you go. That's another cool thing about photography and something like this is I'm constantly learning. We're all learning, right, as we go. And you learn a lot from your mistakes. And I think the old school film photographers were probably much more judicious when they were shooting. And perhaps they were operating at a slightly or higher level of the craft because film's expensive and you didn't waste shots. You would still experiment, but you were paying for film. One of the advantages of shooting digital is that you, of course, get immediate feedback on the photo. And if you don't like it, you can try again, but constantly learning. Thanks, Mary. You just noticed the fingernails too. Good, that's good. I'm gonna move off my hand. I'm gonna use my hand all day.
David, speaking of learning, you know, right now, photography is just such a great way to express yourself creatively during this time while we're all stuck at home. And I know the museum is currently offering some photography classes, but I was wondering if you also have any advice for those who are looking for a creative outlet during this time or are maybe budding photographers themselves.
Well, yeah, I mean, well, here's the cool thing is that we're all, right, we've all got a camera in our pocket and sort of the old adage is the best camera is the one that you have in your hand, right? So, I mean, here's what's crazy. I don't know if Heidi is still on anymore, but her daughter Cora, she got like an iPhone 10 or something that had, you know, the portrait, really cool photography. So she took a photo of me in their kitchen a couple years ago. And I looked at it and I went, wow, I mean, that's professional quality. And she sort of, she's 18, just maybe when she was 16, she sort of slyly said, yes, I'm going to put you out of business. And it's true because, you know, these kids, right, young people with their cameras, their experience is amazing. So here's another thing about different generations. So my generation, you look at photos that we took or had taken of us growing up, and we're all dorks, right? Because we didn't know how to pose, because you didn't get to see the photo until a week later, right? And when Polaroid came out, you still look like a dork, right? Well, the kids now, they know how to pose, right? So they know angle, they know how to position, they know lighting, they know drama. It's just part of their tool and what they use. So, you know, I'm skating on thin ice and running as fast as I can because they're all behind me and they have more energy too. I get tired. Yo, so there's a question from Chuck, one of my good, Chuck Blesworth, great filmmaker and photographer. So a little bit about the post process. That's a good question. So I use Capture One with these, which is a software editing program that you photographers know. I'm not a real big Photoshop guy. There's some incredible Photoshop people out there. So none of these have been Photoshopped. They've all been worked a bit in Capture One, you know, dealing with things like highlights and shadows and things like that. Yeah, so I think the part of the post process, I mean, you know, cleaning dirt off the lens, which is inevitable, things like that. I think one of the things too back here, you'll see distortion in this lens. And I fixed some of the distortion, but if you don't have to look too far to see that some of the angles are not, they're off. Like look in the back of the building back there, you'll notice that there's a little bit of a difference between the horizontal plane of that and the eye still beam at the top. So I did this really quick, right? But distortion for you all who are new to photography, when you're shooting a wide shot for wide lens, in order to be wide, the glass is curved, and this is where like you move into a wider lens, you get into that fisheye effect, and some of you have seen that fisheye type lens. So you can correct for some of this distortion. That's one of the great things about digital, because it's just digital information. I mean, the computer only sees all of this as little pieces of coding, right, that it decides to rearrange. Now, I do shoot in RAW, which photographers on here who are shooting commercially are shooting in RAW anyway. And RAW allows me to do more manipulation. If you don't shoot in RAW, and it's fine if you don't, and you shoot, your camera produces what's called a JPEG, and the camera's little computer internally decides what it thinks the photo should look like and creates it for you. And 9 times out of 10, boom, you get a great photo. I shoot in RAW, which allows me, so for example, in this photo that's up now, I pulled the shadows out of this so that you could see. It's pretty dark in there, but if I had shot this with my iPhone, there'd be a lot of dark shadows in that photo. Great question. Good. Anything else about questions about process or shooting people? Yeah.
I do also want to let people know that if you have any questions that occur to you after the program's over, you can feel free to contact me and I'll pass those along to David. Or if you know him yourself, you can also reach out to David and he can get back to you. So
yeah, thanks,
don't feel
Christy.
pressured if you don't have a question at the moment, but something
That's right. These are good questions. I've got heaps of other photos. I've got some photos of my vacation in Myrtle Beach last summer. If you want me to show those now, I can.
I think we might be a little too jealous of that at this time.
I'm not wearing my Speedo in any of those shots, so that's a good thing. Yeah, in this shot, there's actually, this guy was up there with another guy who's, they're on a cherry picker or whatever the lift is called, and he's to the right. And this is another example of capturing people at their best. So none of these guys are supposed to smoke while they're on the job, right? That's part of the company policy. Well, the guy on the right was smoking a cigarette. So here's an example back to post, Chuck. In post, I took the cigarette out of his mouth, right? I deleted the cigarette so that I could show that photo without putting him potentially in trouble for having a cigarette on site. So the little things that you do. Yeah, thanks, Jim. Thanks for being here. Here's Christy. Yeah, thanks, Christy. Great. Thanks for that shout out.
Kathy asked, how many months were you engaged with this project?
Oh, yeah. So this was over the course of about, well, it went on, didn't it? The project went on and on and on. The poor museum staff, and let me give a shout out to the museum staff, Christy for organizing this, and everyone in the museum, the folks that were here in the beginning of this, and some folks have left and gone on to other things, the folks who came in afterwards. And I feel for them now because, well, the quick answer, about 2 years on this project. I feel for them now because all this exciting opening and boom and all these numbers and here's this building and you drive by now and it's just, it's empty, right? So hopefully being able to do something in the building soon, but a shout out to all the staff. I guess that's it, unless somebody has another. Oh, hey, Frank McConnell on there. So someone asked other types of photos. I like to do musician friends, and Frank is part of a band called Crooked Pine that plays all over the place here. Good old time Americana band music. Yeah, Hillary Schroeder says Crooked Pine's great. There you go. You got a fan on here, Frank. Well done. Those guys are fun. Anything else? Anybody got anything? If not, I mean, you know, we can, I can actually pick up the thing and give you a tour of my house and show you.
I think we can wrap it up now, so you don't have to do
cool.
that in case there are any messy spaces. But thank you so much, David. This was great. I think everyone really enjoyed seeing the photos and hearing from you. And thank you to all our members and guests who joined us today. It was great to hear from you all and to have such an interesting conversation. I think this is the chattiest everyone has been so far, which is wonderful. So just a reminder that I will be sending out an evaluation to everyone, so please do share your feedback. It does help us with future programs and events, especially right now as we're pretty much sticking to virtual until we can reopen. And we are going to continue scheduling special member-only programming every week until we can welcome you back safely to the museum. So be on the lookout every Monday with what we have planned. So thank you again, David. I hope to see many of you again next week. And in the meantime, stay safe and healthy and enjoy the rest of your day. So,
great.
Bye, everyone.